You're listening to Australia's national youth radio station, Triple J. For more info, go to triplej.net.au.
Thanks to the intervention of the ABC board and the generous support of the Macquarie Bank, Triple J reluctantly presents the following 2 hours of unbiased, fair and balanced coverage of the week's topical issues. Would you please be upstanding for the national anthem? And your hosts, Stirling Addison LLB and guest, as we present Restoring the Balance.
Good evening and welcome to Restoring the Balance. I would like to thank Richard Kingsmill for his show, and I would just like to begin tonight's show with an anecdote that illustrates the Richard Kingsmill we don't often see. This week I was in the City Library of Triple J, and in the corner was Richard Kingsmill weeping uncontrollably. And I said to him, "Richard, you seem to be upset. What is the matter?" And he said to me, Stirling, he confided to me, he said, "I'm trapped by my own image as the music scholar." He said, "I'm tired of living a lie. Secretly, I hate the music I play." And I said to him, "Richard, surely there must be one thing in music. You obviously have a passion for music. There must be one thing in music that still gives you some joy." And he said, "Yes, there was. It is as his role as moderator on the message board of the Veronicas website. He does actually, on his Triple J time, look over what goes on the message board of that Australian band's website. His handle there, or his name, is Veronicas Forever. And his eyes sparked with life as he talked about hosing down the speculation about the band's second album. That is a Richard Kingsmill we rarely see. And I would like to thank him for his show this evening. Coming up on Restoring the Balance, the show that cuts through the left liberal lies that pass as commentary. We have 2 hours of conservative comment tonight. Our guests include David Batstone, a professor of ethics. We'll be speaking with the dangerous Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, who is a disarmament educator. And my co-host tonight from ABC's Inside Business is Mr. Tom Elliot. Please stay tuned for 2 hours of thoughtful analysis of the week's events right here on Triple J. Joining me for the next 2 hours is my co-host for the evening from the ABC's Inside Business, Mr. Tom Elliot. Good evening, Tom.
Yes, Stirling, very wonderful to be in here with you again for 2 hours of conservative commentary on a Sunday evening.
Yes, it's, I guess, an oasis of truth, marooned as it is in a sea of lies. I guess I must begin by asking the most obvious question. Where were you when you heard?
Well, I mean, like you, I was glad I was sitting down.
Yes.
Young, fresh Melanie Howard.
Yes.
Impregnated.
Yes.
By a man.
Yes.
We believe to be her husband.
Yes. The conservative way, of course. The child is within wedlock, of course.
I can tell you that at some of the young Liberal meetings I've attended recently, there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth. There were young men out there, Stirling, young men who hoped that even though Melanie was married some years ago, that there was a chance that she might come their way. But it seems that that's very unlikely.
Well, yes, and I'm delighted now that she is with child, and I certainly hope this puts an end to the very tawdry speculation about the virility of her husband, Rowan McDonald. I certainly, hope it puts an end. His loins have issued, and we should just leave it there. And she has chosen him, and we should just be happy with that, and we just need to move on.
Well, we have to move on, but I mean, Stirling, the thing is, in order to do what Peter Costello has asked all young married couples to achieve for the nation, remember, it's not one but three children. One for mum, one for dad, and one for the country. And the good thing is, of course, that this first child that Rowan and Melanie are having is the country's child. Yes,
well said. Well, I know now that they are, of course, getting a baby bonus. And I'm not sure if you're doing this in your workplace, but at the ABC here, I have started a collection to, if you will, top up Melanie's baby bonus of $4,000, hoping to raise another $3,000 or $4,000 from ABC employees to give to Melanie. The cup is empty. Nothing points to the ABC's ingrained hatred of the Howards as much as that. As much as the refusal of ABC employees to give money to the Melanie Howard baby bonus collection.
Yes, I mean, you rattle the tin and there's nothing in it. I remember I had a similarly thankless task at the last federal election at some inner-city latte lefty sipping place where, you know, I kept pointing out to young pregnant people, have another one of those.
Yes, yes.
$4,000 will be coming your way.
Yes.
And you might think about that when you think about who you vote for.
Yes.
I don't think any of them voted for the Liberal Party, though.
Yes, of course not in the inner city, no. We should also congratulate Melanie on putting the needs of the nation before her own career. We should congratulate her, and I do so on behalf of all Triple J listeners, for embracing the higher feminine calling of motherhood and appeal to women everywhere to take note of that example. She had a quaint career. She knew she was pretty much marking time until her womb swelled. Until
she fulfilled her biological destiny, Tony. Stirling, and this was the thing, I mean, you know, women today realise, I think are beginning to realise, because the birth rate is on the way up, that giving forth upon the loins, bearing their husband's seed, that is their lot in life.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is a higher calling. Men, of course, are unable to do so, but we congratulate women everywhere who do so. I just wanted to read out the statement from the proud father. I should say proud grandfather.
Yes, of course, our Prime Minister, John Winston Howard.
Yes, the Prime Minister said, "We are very happy for our daughter and son-in-law, and we look forward to the event with great enthusiasm." You see, his reaction is joyous, but restrained. Yes, his daughter is having children, but let's not go overboard.
That's right. Let's not think too hard about how this child came to be. And of course, when we say child, of course, we all hope we get son, because what we're really after is a new generation of Howards to lead this nation.
Yes.
And of course, you know, the right passes through the male line.
Yes, patrilineal and all that. So we are asking this evening on the talkback number 1300 055536, what name would you like to give Melanie's son? We are so sure on this show that her loins will issue a male heir, a scion. There can be no thought given to a female child first off.
Yeah, so male names only. Now, of course, they'll of course be good Presbyterian names, not Catholic.
No, although I'm suggesting Scottish names, a list of Scottish names. Barclay would be one, or Baxter, or Brodie.
Callum.
I like that name, yes.
Now, I tell you something there, Stirling. Another great leader of our times, about whom a movie was recently made, Idi Amin, the great African leader from the mid-70s, had a wonderful tradition of naming all his sons with Scottish first names.
Yes.
And two of his sons were called Campbell and Mackenzie.
Well,
wonderful choices for young Melanie Howard there.
I'm sure they've turned out to be fine, upstanding men. If you would like to weigh into this, the number again, 1300 055536. What name would you like to give the Prime Minister's first grandchild? This is Restoring the Balance on Triple J. You're with Stirling Addison, my co-host for the evening from ABC Inside Business, Mr. Tom Elliot. We are, of course, congratulating the Prime Minister's daughter. She is with child.
With child, more than 3 months pregnant, I believe.
Yes.
With a son, we hope. The nation hopes.
We should expect a son. We should expect that she issues a male heir. We are asking the Triple J audience this evening, the number 1300 055536, if you were tasked with naming her child, what name would you give it?
Well, thus far we've been through a list of Scottish names. Of course, I brought up the fact that Idi Amin's sons were called Campbell and Mackenzie.
Yes.
We had Cullum, Dougal and Hamish.
Yes.
And I might also look to the New Testament for inspiration. Of course, John, Melanie's wonderful father. We could have a Peter or a Simon.
Yes.
Perhaps not so Old Testament, though, I don't think.
I wouldn't go Peter.
No.
Peter Costello. We are speaking to Neil from Brisbane. Good evening, Neil. How are you?
Well, thank you, Stirling. How are you?
I'm cloud nine for Melanie, of course. It does put so much more pressure on my relationship with Penny.
Understandably so.
March her down the aisle and get her likewise with child.
Exactly. Well, Stirling, I think it's a rather simple and obvious choice for name. I think it should be Robert Menzies Howard.
Outstanding.
That's very good, Neil. Robert Menzies Howard, of course, pictures of Robert Menzies hanging in every room of the Howard household.
Yes.
Both generations.
And well they might, but you wouldn't...
Grandfather John Howard sitting young Robert on his knee reading fiscal policy.
Yes, of course. You could have no finer tutor in sound economic and fiscal management than Robert Menzies, who, of course, was the great helmsman of one of the great periods of Australia's economic prosperity, of course, ruined by the election of Gough Whitlam. And we shan't talk about that tonight, but thank you, Neil. Perfect.
Thank you, Sterling.
Michael from Barwon.
How are you, mate?
I'm very well. Michael, if you are charged with naming the Prime Minister's grandchild and your name is hovering above the birth certificate, let's just assume you're not a normal Triple J listener, in which case you can actually write. What name would you give the Prime Minister's grandchild?
I'm thinking Yoda.
Yoda.
Yes.
Why?
Well, obviously it doesn't come from the dark side, but I mean, they may well do. He may well do.
Who would come from the dark side?
Well, if it's a male heir, the dark side being the Prime Minister.
I wouldn't say that he's dark, and I'd call on you to withdraw the remark.
Okay, remark withdrawn.
There you go. Thank you very much, Michael from Barwon. We have Mick from Brisbane.
Hey, g'day, mate. How are you?
Typical of the left to back down immediately upon being challenged. Mick from Brisbane, if you were to give the Prime Minister's grandchild a name, what would it be?
Well, mate, my wife is...
I'm not your mate.
my wife is English.
Yes?
And we had 3 daughters before our first son was born.
Oh, the agony.
They were named Jane, Elizabeth and Anne.
Oh, splendid.
And the boy, right, she wanted to call James or Henry, something like that.
Yes.
We chose Rex.
Rex?
As in Rexford.
Rexford. I was, of course, thinking Latin for king.
That's right, and it is actually an old English name, and I thought Rex Howard has got a good name, good sound to it.
Yes, now, Mick, advice that you would give to other young parents out there, if you keep having daughters, should you just keep trying and trying and trying until you get a son?
Oh, of course I did. And as soon as the son was born, I got neutered.
Yes, yes, for the country.
That's right.
Mick, I'm going to float what will no doubt be seen by the hysterical lesbians who run the ABC as something of a heretical proposal. Do you think the baby bonus should be worth more if you have a son?
Definitely.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, but no qualms.
Well, of course, in most cultures, Sterling, sons are much more highly valued than daughters.
Yes.
China,
yes.
India,
yes.
All the good places on earth.
Yes.
But
yes.
I'm just picturing future Prime Minister of Australia, Rex Howard.
Yes, I know. It's got a certain ring to it, Mick, and well spoken.
You're welcome.
And thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
1300 055536 if you'd like to weigh in. If you had to name the Prime Minister's grandchild, who we're assuming will be male, give us a call and talk. We're friendly conservatives here on Restoring the Balance. Triple J. We are proud that Melanie Howard will issue. She will have a child. She's pregnant at the moment. We are asking, what male name would you give the child?
Yes, now, of course, we've been through Scottish names. We've been through names from the New Testament. Of course, it is male names only tonight.
Yes.
The number, of course, 1300 055536.
Thank you, Tom. We have Greg from Melbourne. We have Alistair from Canberra. We have Alistair. I always said it was Alistair. How are you, Alistair?
I'm well, thanks. How are you going?
I'm very well.
Alistair, you have a Scottish name. Would you advise other people to call their firstborn, their most precious male child, by a Scottish first name?
Oh, yeah, why not? We were thinking maybe if in case it was a girl,
yes,
perhaps they could call it Stan.
Stan.
Yeah.
That's not actually a girl's name.
Oh, my sister's called Stan.
Short for?
Stan.
Stan the non-man.
Just Stan.
Stan.
Stan. And if it's a boy?
If it's a boy, George W. Jr.
Yes, it does. It would, of course, pay tribute to the twice elected President of the United States.
Well, in fact, 3 times if you include his father.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And close personal friend of John Howard. Australia, of course, has benefited greatly from the warmth and strength of that relationship. We thank you for your call, Alistair.
No worries.
Now, Tom, we have spoken much of the erosion of core Christian values in Australia.
Oh, yes. I mean, this program, which I think is a wonderful thing, it gives people a chance to, as you put it, Stirling, restore the balance.
Yes.
Bring back the values that we used to hold so dear to our hearts.
Yes.
And try and promote them again to a community out there, and in particular the Triple J community, which has lost its way.
Yes, lost its way to creeping secularism and an ignorance of what has made Australia great in the past. We are now speaking with a man called Peter Stokes, who's co-founder of the Salt Shakers, about revitalising Christian values in Australia. The Salt Shakers are committed to helping individual Christians, fellowships, home groups, Bible colleges, in speaking out on ethics and issues such as gambling, drugs and euthanasia. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening. How are you?
Peter, tell us more about the Salt Shakers. What do you see as your mission in life?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We never actually started off with a mission. We started off, my wife and I decided to oppose poker machines going into our local shopping centre.
Yes.
Because we thought that was something that shouldn't happen.
A cancer in the community.
I believe it actually is. And I'm thankful that 10 years after we told Jeff Kennett that they were a cancer on society, he's actually started to believe it.
Yes.
Which actually came out a few years ago and said that they should never have gone into such places as shopping centres and every street corner.
I will stop you there. That is the only criticism of a Liberal I will allow on the show.
Well, I'll try and remember that.
Yes,
I'm not party biased, you see, so I might take on both sides.
Yes.
From that humble beginning, which was 3 years of actually winning and losing as we went through that process, and actually finding out that the local community today has very little power over what happens in its community because of the way governments have changed the rules about decision-making.
Labor governments?
Well, mostly Labor governments,
mostly
yes.
Labor,
When they actually introduced brothels into Victoria, they took away the right of the local community to actually make decisions on moral grounds or community interest.
Yes.
And that has affected every vote since.
Well, it's affected Triple J as well. Many people who work at Triple J, announcers, patronise brothels.
Consort with prostitutes.
I'll let you be the judge of that.
Some even subsidise incomes by working there.
Well, of course, since they legalised brothels, when we had 50 illegal brothels, now we have 400 illegal ones and 100 legal ones, so it really has done a wonderful job of promoting the prostitution industry.
Yes.
And that's what happens when you actually promote what we would call sin. Which is prostitution, brothels. And when you legalise those things, as with gambling, it just runs rife in the community and creates enormous problems, not only for those involved, but for the extended family as well. And that's one of the reasons we got started as a ministry, was because we felt we discovered there were so many things happening in the community that the Christian voice was sort of getting swamped. We decided it was time to try and change that, to turn the tables and bring back some of those, well, old-fashioned maybe values, but if anybody can tell me what's wrong with them, I'd be very willing to listen.
Now, Peter, what about drinking? You know, these days anybody can go to the Liquor Licensing Commission and just pull in a pub licence, even if they just want to run a cafe. And let's face it, some members of the church, some Catholic priests have been known to sort of tip down the contents of a few bottles down their throats.
Yes.
Are you out there stopping, this spread of alcoholism in our community?
Well, not being a Catholic, I won't criticise the Catholic priests.
Please criticise. Please.
Because that's not my role.
There are a lot of drunks amongst them, though.
I believe there is a major problem with drink, and I think we need to do something about alcohol advertising, and I've certainly run many a campaign against the advertising of alcohol. The promotion of sport with alcohol is a major problem, and of course we see so many footballers getting caught up with alcohol and then leading to other problems.
On this show, we take a very strong line against mid-strength beer.
Well, I'm glad you did that.
We're not fans of it. Fans.
I'm not fans of any beer, actually. I've never liked Australian beer, so it never worried me.
Yes. Now, what else are you doing to bring Christian values back? And are you doing anything at the same time to make them, because we are in Triple J, an audience that deludes itself into thinking it's somehow cool? Do you have to pitch your Christian values as being cool to the iPod-wearing generation?
I think it's necessary to say why some of these things are good and why some things are bad, and not just say the Bible says. And so we don't do that. We actually research the issues and find out the very effects they are having on society, and then we actually promote those. And sadly, so many of those bad effects are not really talked about in society. Truth seems to be the first casualty in any war, and there is a war at the moment between good moral values and bad.
Yes.
And truth certainly does seem to be the casualty.
Well, you truly are behind enemy lines at the ABC.
Now, how would you feel, though?
Well, I enjoy that.
We've got Labor governments, state Labor governments around this great nation of ours, absolutely addicted themselves to the revenue from gambling. They like to call it gaming, as though there's just a game involved. And how would you get them off the literally billions of dollars they're pulling out of people's pockets?
Well, I don't believe that government should get any money out of the gambling industry. Sadly, the gambling support fund that was set up by the Kennett government has been nothing but misused by every government ever since. In fact, people who tried to work with gambling addicts were refused money from that fund, and yet they could do all sorts of things with it, with boat races and all sorts of other things. I think that we have to actually start withdrawing the money from the government that they get from gambling, because that's the only way they're going to start cutting back the gambling issue. It is a major problem. There are thousands of people in our society that are suffering from gambling addiction. Yes. And not only those people, but the families, even work. People have shut their businesses because of gambling problems. There are all sorts of problems.
So to paraphrase what you're saying is this year, don't gamble by voting for Kevin Rudd.
I don't know that Kevin Rudd's got a policy on gambling. I'm not sure, other than helping the poor, he's got a policy on too many things. Apart from global warming, of course. He's got a big policy on global warming.
Yes, it's hilarious, I read.
And that's, there seems to be the key plank in their issue, but it's a plank with a lot of splinters in it, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, what about drugs, Peter Stokes? You mentioned withdrawal before. We've got all these left-wing inner-city councils around the place building shooting galleries for people to go in and take illegal substances.
Well, fortunately, we haven't. And I would pride myself on being part of the very strong campaign that opposed those when Steve Bracks first came into power. He came in promising 5 injecting rooms for Victoria. And there was an enormous public campaign. I was actually chairman of a group called, with a ridiculous name, of the Community Coalition for a Drug-Free Society. It would be very nice if we could have a drug-free society, but that would include alcohol.
Nobody listening to Triple J.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they'd listen a little more carefully because they wouldn't be consuming the things they're consuming. But the fact is that there are no drug injecting rooms in Victoria, and the only one in Australia, of course, is in New South Wales, which has been an absolutely total disaster. It's still today a honeypot for drug sellers. There are all sorts of people that are literally legally shooting up illegal substances and very dangerous substances because New South Wales didn't fight enough. We are very proud of the fact that we stopped those injecting rooms, and in fact no government now has that policy in Victoria.
New South Wales will fight again and will be right again.
I think they'll win, actually, once the truth starts to come out. And as I said, that's the first casualty. There's a lot of lies coming out about the injecting room in Sydney.
But, of course, in New South Wales, they keep electing the same sorts of government over and over and over again.
Yeah, but what's the opposition doing? I mean, really, when you look at what the Liberal Party
parading
offered,
around in Speedos.
It really didn't offer very much. And I think that's the major problem. You'll never have a change of government until you've got a decent opposition.
Well, according to my fiancée Penny, Deadman did offer quite a bit, just not in terms of policy. Peter, thank you for coming in. Peter Stokes, co-founder of the Salt Shakers. If we need to get in contact with the Salt Shakers, what do we do?
Anybody can phone 03 9800 2855 or go to our website www.saltshakers.org.au, and we're there to help people challenge the evil things that are happening in our society, like gambling and drinking and sex and all those things. Sex? Did I mention that word?
You did mention sex.
On Triple J.
Yes.
Fancy mentioning that word on Triple J.
Well, of course, we talked about Melanie Howard before. She's with child. Sterling here is upset at the fact that sex possibly was involved.
I would...
a very strong possibility, I would think.
He still believes fervently in the virgin birth.
Yes, I think something...
The Immaculate Conception.
Yes, possibly something along those lines.
Not for anybody in the Howard family, I don't think.
It may have occurred. Peter, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Triple J, Restoring the Balance. Shortly we're talking about, our victory over global warming, the Was Earth Hour.
Yes, turn off the lights, sit in the dark for an hour.
Yes.
Feel good about yourself.
Yes, let's turn the clock back 900 years and sit in primordial darkness. And that'll really teach the planet to cool down. But at the moment, we are rejoicing in the fact that Melanie Howard is heavy with child. She's pregnant. The Prime Minister will be a doting grandfather this year, and we are naturally ecstatic about that. We are calling for your suggestions as to a name. 1300 055536 is the talkback number, or you can text one through 19757 555, provided your dole money hasn't gone on beer and drugs and you still have enough credit on your phone. Please send something in. We have Cal from the Blue Mountains who has a suggestion for a name for the Prime Minister's grandchild. Cal.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Excellent. Yourself?
I'm doing very well.
Good to hear it. My suggestion is bonsai.
Bonsai.
Yes,
honouring our Japanese allies.
Not quite. John Howard is a mini Bush, and it'll be a mini John Howard, so that would make it a bonsai.
He's a mini Bush.
Yes.
Yes, you're a very clever man there, Carl, aren't you?
Yes.
Making fun of our leader of 11 years.
Yes.
Yes, he's done an outstanding job.
He has done an outstanding job. The country has never been so prosperous.
Never been so wealthy. Never has there been so much money for people to spend on things like alcohol, gambling, drugs.
Or plasma screens. There is, of course, $1 trillion in superannuation funds at the moment. That didn't exist 11 years ago.
People can sit there and turn the lights on and off in their houses.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
As they see fit.
If you think selling your house and then renting it off the person you sold it to is good economics, then yeah.
Yes, yes. Cal, your economics degree is from which university? Sorry, I missed that.
I have none.
You have none? It's probably from the University of an inner city cafe somewhere.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for calling.
My
Bonsai.
pleasure.
I'll have to remember that.
Okay.
We have Greg from Melbourne.
Hi, Stirling.
Greg, the Prime Minister is to have a grandson, we hope fervently. We will accept a granddaughter, but we yearn secretly for a grandson. If you were to name the child, what would it be?
Hi, Stirling. I think Adolf would be a good name for John Howard's grandson.
Adolf.
Yeah.
Adolf.
Trying to make a historical reference there?
Yes, well, there was a famous leader by the name of Adolf who had, similar policies of racial purity and keeping immigrants away.
Yes.
Yes, this would be the Australia that lets in 130,000 migrants a year.
Yes.
Higher than under any Labor government.
Oh, yes, but only white ones.
White ones.
Yes.
Yes.
Had a look around the inner city of any of our major cities recently?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. An invidious comparison. Greg would urge you to A, read history, and B, read any Department of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs website. You might get a correction that would scare you a bit. But thanks nonetheless, Greg. Adolf. Disgusting, really.
We have some curious listeners, don't we, Stirling? We had suggestions of Adolf, bonsai.
Bonsai, little bush, yes.
Yoda.
Probably Greg is the sort of lunatic who would embrace Earth Hour. I don't know if you were in Sydney last night, but the idea was to turn your lights off for an hour.
Saturday night, 7:30.
Yes.
And the best they can do in the mad place that is Sydney is let's sit in the dark for an hour on a Saturday evening.
Yes.
And try and feel good about ourselves.
Yes, yes. Well, I just want to say this. It's very typical of the Australian Labor Party. They've been back in power a week and already there's been a blackout. Yes, yes, well said. Yes, because the state of New South Wales was actually plunged into darkness a week ago when the ALP were, of course, re-elected. But we shouldn't mock this, of course, Tom, because some scientific luminaries have promoted the cause greatly of Earth Hour. We are talking, of course, of Tracy Spicer, Ben Gillies, and Kate Blanchett. Therefore, we on this show urge John Howard to fully embrace the hysterical predictions made about global warming, because for God's sake, he's being warned by celebrities.
Yes, well, isn't that right? And, of course, turning off the lights on a few buildings for 1 hour on the busiest night of the week is not going to make any difference whatsoever.
I urge the people behind Earth Hour, if you're really serious about saving electricity, if you really believe in this, break into any hospital and turn off the life support machines.
Yes, or while you're at it, just turn yourself off for a while, perhaps permanently, and that will certainly save power.
I must say it did produce some conflict in our house. I was talking to Penny about this, and she's apparently fanatically devoted to the cause of Earth Hour, because she has insisted to me that if ever we try to conceive a child, the lights must be out.
Well,
she said the lights...
Sorry, but Stirling, it does go without saying that if you are doing your duty for the nation, as Melanie Howard and her husband Rowan have done approximately 3.5 months ago...
Yes, let's not dwell on that.
Just the one time.
She has chosen Rowan. They are happily married. We, as a nation, everybody just listening to Triple J needs to move on from the fact that Melanie has chosen someone and is married to him and is now having a child. We just need to move along.
Move along, Stirling. That's right, move along. But the point is, if you are going to do your duty for the nation, of course, everybody's encouraged to do that, especially Triple J listeners. If you want to have a man-child up first, for the nation, as Peter Costello has pointed out, you have to turn the lights off.
Yes.
We had Peter Stokes in from Salt Shakers before, talking about Christian beliefs and Christian morality.
Yes.
And it's very, very clear that the lights were off, back in the good old days.
Yes.
And so they should be today. So if we have to have Earth Hour, let's make sure we're conceiving children.
Yes, well said, well said. That sort of conservative comment would only appear on Restoring the Balance, here on Triple J. We are speaking about Melanie Howard. She is to give the nation an adored child sometime this year, of course, the first grandchild of the Prime Minister, and we're asking if you'd like to call the number 1300 0555 36, what would you name the child? And I am here with, from Inside Business on the ABC, Mr. Tom Elliot.
Yes, we've had some extraordinarily stupid suggestions tonight, Stirling, and some quite good ones as well from people. We'd stand whether or not the child is a female or a male.
Yes.
Interesting.
A gender-neutral name, yes. Yes. Right now we go to the Victorian Goldfields, Castlemaine. We have Peter. Good evening, Peter.
How you going?
Peter, if you were entrusted with the honour of naming Melanie's child, what would you call it?
Belvedere is the name.
Belvedere.
Belvedere.
Yes, it has certain connotations. Why would you choose that name, Peter?
Do you remember the cartoon, Bugs Bunny cartoon, the Belvedere one?
No.
It's a type of American car too, as well, I think.
No, Belvedere, but it's an old, it's more of the aristocracy sort of a name.
Yes. Well, John Howard, of course, does come from humble origins. His father ran a petrol station. He is hardly what you would call blue blood or of high or noble birth.
No,
he simply
where he is now.
Worked his way to where he is by dint of hard work and personality.
Yeah, but where he is now is not where he's come from, and the way he behaves now. That's
what
it suits.
No, he makes a good point. This is how aristocrats are made. They start off at lowly birth, work their way up, cement their position at the top.
So you're saying, Peter, you admire a man who has come from, we should say, humble, lower middle class origins to where he is now, the nation's chief executive, earning $300,000 a year.
Oh, yeah, mate. He should be the king of Australia.
The king. Oh, monarchist, a fellow monarchist.
Well, and of course we had the suggestion earlier that Rex should be the young child's name.
Yes.
Meaning king.
Regis, yes.
Regis.
That's
and of course
Belvedere, because, and I could imagine Belvedere being a bit like, Charlie Windsor, heir to the throne but never quite make it.
Yes. A stab at the heir to the throne. Okay, thank you, Peter.
No worries.
John Howard has, of course, made it. He has made it.
And, of course, Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, may yet make it.
Yes. But we...
Still a young, virile man.
Yes, not that we wish any ill health to the head of state of Australia,
Her
who is,
Majesty.
of course, the Queen. Yes, and the head of the Anglican Church. We have Darren from the New South Wales coast. Good evening, Darren.
How you going, mate?
I'm doing very well, Darren. If you had to name the Prime Minister's first grandchild, what name would you choose?
Mate, I'd name him Bulletproof Vest.
Bulletproof Vest, a triple-barreled name. Is that in honour of the Prime Minister addressing an angry mob of shooters in the wake of the Port Arthur massacre in 1996?
That it is.
Yes. We noticed that it could have been something else bulging under the suit, and of course we would have to ask John Howard's wife something about that, something she would have seen many times, I'm sure.
Yes, well, if we read into Port Arthur a bit further, we realise that there is no evidence that Martin Bryant...
Yes, of course, yes. I hope you vote One Nation. They have a very interesting policy on all of that. A good conspiracy theory. Love them. And it's a pity we couldn't hear Darren Moore. Yes. It's a great pity.
Yes, well, Martin Bryant, of course, he shares a few characteristics with someone else who's languishing in prison at the moment there, Stirling.
Yes, beautifully put. Thank you. Another dangerous criminal. And we shall be talking about Hicksy very shortly. We have Nick from Coffs Harbour. Nick? Nick, if we can just put our insane and deluded conspiracy theories to one side.
Yeah.
Who would you name the Prime Minister's grandchild after?
It would have to be Donald Bradman.
Perfect.
Excellent choice, Nick.
Perfect. Have you been to the home place of Donald Bradman?
Oh, I did pass through there in my semi-trailer once.
Yes.
And it did take me 500 metres to stop, but
Barrel.
I made the effort. And,
yes.
And it was well worth it.
Have you made the pilgrimage to Adelaide where the great man passed away?
At Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nick, what sort of routes do you drive in the semi-trailer?
Well, I drive sort of Sydney to Adelaide, Melbourne, up to Queensland.
What do you do when you're seeing annoying people in small foreign cars? I mean, do you decide to try and run them off the road?
My real work here is to undermine the Transport Workers Union. And,
yes, excellent.
Yeah, it's the
dangerous.
best I can do with a minimal education, but
yes.
Yeah, I am doing my bit for the right.
Yes, excellent. A fellow traveller. Well, a traveller and a fellow traveller. The question that has to be asked, Nick, Coffs Harbour, that neck of the woods, if you were racing down the road, doing, of course, 100 kilometres an hour, no more, no less, and a fire-twirling hippie jumped out of you as if you're 10 kilometres out of Nimbin, would the heel of your boot bother the brake pedal?
I wouldn't have thought so.
Excellent.
And the only trouble is whether the fence would do any damage on the way to get him.
Well spoken, Nick.
Yes, it's hard to keep a. You're driving one of those three rig ones, a road train,
a B double or
no. I'm just sort of trying to fit in with the common denominator of a semi trailer.
Yes, right. Yes, excellent. Yeah. Nick, it's been wonderful to speak to you, Donald Bradman for the Prime Minister.
I'd say that's the most sensible suggestion we've heard tonight. The Prime Minister's a great lover of cricket.
Yes, he is.
And, of course, that image of the Don, with just the stump bouncing the golf ball off the family's water tank. Yes. Another person who came from humble beginnings.
And
to become a successful cricket player and stockbroker in Adelaide.
Yes, very successful stockbroker. Fondly remembered there. This is Restoring the Balance on Triple J.
Restoring the Balance. Proudly using non-union labour.
Conservative, yes. Ashamed, no. That's this show. You're with Stirling Addison and Tom Elliot, taking you through for another hour. Tom, we're talking at the moment, or about to, I should say, to David Batstone, Professor of Ethics at the University of San Francisco, a liberal hotspot. A festering sore.
Well, I mean, you talked about fire-twirling hippies up in Nimbin before. Now, I tell you, Stirling, you go to San Francisco, if you're driving a truck through the Haight-Ashbury area
Yes.
I mean, you need a very large bull bar on the front.
I will say with some pride, though, giant multinational Ben & Jerry's have now set up shop in Haight-Ashbury. They occupy one corner. Take that, hippies. Twirl a fire stick there. But David is in here to talk to us about ethics in business, plus slavery. The poor left. Ooh, David Hicks. Ooh, he'll be out in 9 months. We are the left. We are bereft. We have nothing to whinge about. Well, maybe David might be your saviour. Maybe he might have a new cause celeb to complain about. David, thank you for coming in.
Hey, it's a real pleasure to be on your show.
David, you have written a book. It is about slavery. Can you give us some statistics for the Triple J listeners to weep into their cafe lattes about?
Absolutely. 27 million people in slavery today, 80% women, half are children. Yes. I discovered it in San Francisco, believe it or not.
Yes.
Ran into it in a restaurant. In the Indian restaurant, there was a center of a slavering of 500 young girls being brought over.
Yes.
to work in the U.S.
You would call it slavery. Somebody maybe on my side would call it flexibility in the workforce.
Yes, we have a thing here in Australia called the Workplace Relations Act, which our wonderful Prime Minister has brought in, and allows successful entrepreneurial types to say, righto, I've got some money, I've got some capital, I've got some entrepreneurial spirit, and I apply labour to the mix in the correct proportions. Out pops the profit. Where's the slavery in that?
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about cheap labor or sweatshop labor. Really, I'm talking about our people who are deceived or abducted to come into another country. Their passports taken from them. They're forced to work without compensation. And if they try to leave, they will be violently dealt with, or their families back home will be. So they are bonded. They are slaved.
Yes. Surely this is a problem we can assure ourselves exists elsewhere and not Australia.
Unfortunately, it's not the case. Right now, there's not a clarity about how many people in Australia are enslaved because of the fact that there's very little protections in place for anyone who would be trafficked into this country. But I was just in Kew tonight, and in Kew there was 12 young Thai girls who were enslaved in a brothel on the second floor of a pub. The windows were painted shut, the windows were nailed down, and this trafficker had brought them in and forced them to work nightly in the sex industry.
But David, I mean, we've already had callers tonight say that John Winston Howard, our Prime Minister, whose daughter will be giving birth within 6 months, that he doesn't allow people of colour to come into this country. So how can this be? How can we be having Thai slaves if only white people from perhaps Northern and Central Europe are allowed into this great country of ours?
Well, some have been brought in really under a visa program that would be manipulated or exploited, maybe a Visa 457, or they've been brought in on the coast legally, but they are here, and it's not only in sex slavery but also in labor trafficking that they are forced to work without compensation, even though they've been promised employment in construction, for instance.
Yes. Well, you're actually at the ABC, which is the flip side of the problem you're talking about. People here are forced not to work.
Yes, in fact, they get paid not a lot of money to do virtually nothing.
Nothing.
To sit around in this edifice that, it's just a giant cafe here at the ABC.
Everybody's free to work here, aren't they?
But nobody does. What would you do about that problem?
Yeah, that's right. I think we need a separate campaign for that. We should make free not to work. That's what we should have.
Don't worry, it's written above the door as you walk in here.
Yes. Now, David, you've also written a book, Saving the Corporate Soul. I wasn't aware it needed saving.
I wasn't aware it had one.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that an oxymoron? Yeah, I went out and found the 50 companies that I thought, gee, these folks do business with passion and purpose, but also for profit. And I don't think those are all mutually exclusive.
It's Ben & Jerry's, the ice cream company that's invaded the former hippie enclave of Haight-Ashbury in your hometown of San Francisco. Is that one of the companies?
Well, you know, I do not feature Ben & Jerry's, but I will say it's really interesting. I had an interview with Ben about the fact that he sold his company out to Unilever, and it was one of the dark days of his life. He wished he'd never done it.
Yes, it must have been so hard.
Yes, you feel bad for him, don't you?
How many $100 million did he get?
Yeah, exactly, and every time he walks to the bank, he's got a tear in his eye. You bet.
Yes. So what companies in particular get the rabbit left seal of approval?
Cliff Bar, which is a great energy bar company. You know, you go on those bike rides and you want to eat a energy bar, which is like a healthy candy bar. Also, Co-op Italia out of Italy, that in order for them to put a good on the shelf, a supplier has to ensure that they have not used slave labor or used environmentally damaging practices. I know that you applaud both of those, but they really resist that. So there's lots of companies all over the globe. I got 50 of them, and I know there's more.
Is there an Australian one amongst them, or have you adopted a fiercely anti-Australian stance in this research?
I have banned Australia from appearing on the list, and I'm here to see if whether or not I need to reconsider my position.
You've banned Australia?
Absolutely.
Why on earth? We have wonderful country. We have BHP, one of the world's great extractor of natural resources.
They almost
made
it. Yeah, they almost made it on the good list, but they just at the end they just fell short on a few goals.
Largest gambling concerns that help Australians who would otherwise have nothing to do fritter away their time.
Yes,
that was tempting. That was tempting, but they didn't make it.
Yes,
alcohol.
Didn't make it at all.
What about Microsoft? Everybody on the left loves to criticise Bill Gates, and yet they usually do so via email. which he invented.
I went up to, I spent a day with the Microsofties. Really fascinating. I've never been to a company where the perception inside the company, they're really proud of what they do, really competency-based culture. They feel like they're smarter than everybody else, but they really hate the fact that everybody hates them.
Yes.
They're in a cocktail party in Seattle, and they'll say, where do you work? You say, well, a software company. And so they said to me, why do you think people hate us so much? And I said, look, when someone goes into negotiation with you, a software company or any other kind of technology company, you try and squeeze them for every last bit of dollar. You don't leave anything on the table. It's all for you. And then they have to work with you because you're such a gorilla. I said, if you would have something that made them feel like there's a win-win, that there's something to be gained from the relationship. And, they said, honestly, gosh, you know what? And these are major execs at the company, not kind of, the guy at the door who greeted me.
Yes.
Said, you're right. We've learned that at the end, too late in the day, but that's what we're trying to do now. Because
and then screwed you on your appearance fee, I hope.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I'm still waiting to get that check.
And David, being an American, you must feel a bit like that when you travel, that everybody hates you. And I see that on your bag out there you put a Canadian flag on it. So that,
I got a better cover, actually. I married an Australian girl from Melbourne, down by Aspendale. So I have 4 kids. They have Australian passports. My wife has an Australian passport, so I hide behind them.
Right. Well, we applaud the job America is doing in the war against terrorism. You are an ally. Like it or not.
Well, you know what? And, we've been abandoned one by one, but we are very proud that we have one friend left in the world.
There is still a 41-country coalition of the willing.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. And so that's why I'm here to reconsider my position on saving the corporate soul, because you have been such a good friend in the war that least I can do is put you on the good books of corporations.
Yes. Now, if you wanted to read some of your hysterical writings about slavery, where would you go?
You would go to any of the fine bookstores you have here in Melbourne. Harper put out the book. Rupert Murdoch, actually, a good friend of mine.
Yes.
Not for sale. Not for sale.
That's the Rupert Murdoch is not for sale, but the name of the book is not for sale.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Everyone has their cost, and Rupert Murdoch reached his price. Not for sale, The Return of the Global Slave Trade and How We Can Fight It. And, it's on most good bookstores. If they don't have it, please burn it down.
David, can I just put it to you, as an entrepreneur, as a marketing man myself, calling something not for sale is not the greatest way to make money from it.
Well, there's kind of this Australian opinion, up the authorities. I thought it'd be a good kind of counter psychology. They say not for sale, and they walk up, I will buy this book. It is for sale. Yes. How does it work? What do you think?
I'll show you.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll buy this. I'll buy 5 of them.
Yes. And at what price is the book not for sale?
Yeah. Well, for $14.95 you can walk out. But that's actually American money. Yeah, no, it says it's sold for $24.95 here.
And what percentage of that goes to charity?
3 cents goes to help free slaves in the world. Yes. No. Yes. Harper, I say this, the good folks at Harper, they have given an undisclosed percentage to those groups that are fighting slavery.
Yes. So you mean General Lee's forces in the north?
Exactly.
Yes.
No, these are people who are rescuing children out of rug looms and rice mills and brick kilns and brothels in Cambodia and in Canberra.
Do you call it the Civil War or the war between the states?
We call them both. It depends where you live. And I thought slavery was over, and I found out when I stumbled on it in the United States, I went deeper into the investigation, and I found that there's up to 200,000 people enslaved in my country. That is, people not paid to work and cannot leave.
These wouldn't be all those Mexicans trying to cross your border there. We've almost got to employ a group called the Minutemen to beat them back.
Yes, that would be a brilliant idea. We should do that.
Those slaves, yes.
In fact, you should put them up by Darwin.
Well,
we could ship some of those Americans over here.
We could use more robust border defence in Australia.
Well, Stirling, there's a point to be made that if you can successfully cross the Torres Straits or the oceans to our north with no assistance, I'm not talking about a boat, I'm talking about swimming, maybe you deserve to stay here.
You deserve a one-way trip to the Cocos Islands or Nauru. That's where you should be going. David Batstone, Professor of Ethics at the University of San Francisco. The book Not for Sale is in lesbian-run bookshops in the inner city somewhere near you. Follow the smell of cafe lattes. You can't miss it. Thank you for coming in.
It's been an insightful and engaging period of time together with you. Thank you.
Restoring the Balance, Triple J.
Restoring the Balance on Triple J. Your taxes barely at work.
This is Restoring the Balance with myself, Stirling Addison, my co-host for this evening, Mr. Tom Elliot. The song we heard, Sean Lee's Ping Pong Orchestra, Kiss the Sky. We just heard the hysterical table thumping of Professor David Batstone about the alleged problem of slavery in the world, Tom.
Yes, well, he seems to regard people who actually work for a minimum wage, people who are holding up our modern society, doing the jobs that others don't want to do. He calls it slavery.
We call it economic opportunity.
Look, Stirling, I mean, the mines have to be dug, the chimneys have to be swept.
Yes.
Hewers of wood and drawers of water. That's what I say. It's the economic ladder of opportunity.
Yes.
Today's slave, today's low-wage worker.
Yes.
Is tomorrow's successful capitalist.
Well, if or when you go to whichever Anglican church you attend over Easter, you will know that Jesus himself was something of a slave. He was a lowly placed person in society. It's not the worst thing in life. Somebody has to do it.
And he ended up on the right-hand side of God, as we know.
Exactly.
As you will also hear if you insist upon attending those church services over the best part of Easter.
Yes. Now, we were talking about this after hearing David Batstone's hysteria. We thought, well, we could all do with some labour-saving devices, and there is no greater labour-saving device in the world than a slave.
Well, of course, they're so flexible.
Yes.
Now, a lot of labour around the house that in the past would have been done by a slave. I'm thinking of clothes washing.
Yes.
Dishwashing.
Cooking. Yes.
A lot of those things are done by modern devices.
Yes.
But there's no modern device that hands around the drinks at a cocktail party.
Yes, and knows in advance what drink you will want at that cocktail party.
That's right. And does it perhaps with an amusing anecdote or something like that?
Yes, only when spoken to. The number 1300 055536, we want to know if you did have a slave. If you did have a slave, what would that slave do for you? What menial job would you want your slave to perform on a regular basis? I have long called for, if we could, a lot of people don't know, Tom, that within the Australian Constitution is the capacity for us to absorb New Zealand into the Federation of Australia.
Well, in fact, we created the word Australasia for that very purpose about 110 years ago.
Yes. Well, we could have New Zealanders as white slaves.
As slaves.
Who speak a form of English, understand it better than they speak it.
Capable of simple tasks.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. Could we have a New Zealander? If you do have a New Zealander slave in your house, what job would they do? Join us in this. 1300 055536. What job would you get your slave to do for you? This is Restoring the Balance on Triple J. Myself, Stirling Addison, and Tom Elliot. Tom, conservative comment in Australia is a rarity. There is a concerted campaign by those in the media to crush all dissent of the left liberal line, which is why shows such as this are important.
Well, this is right. I mean, the ABC allegedly has a new bias against bias, if you put it that way.
Yes.
But the fact is that there are so many signs in the world around us, particularly here in Australia, but and in other countries, that family values, traditional family values, the underpinnings of our modern society,
the moral bedrock,
on which we stand. The moral compass, if you like, that guides the way.
Yes.
But these family values are under threat. Now, for example, you mentioned New Zealand before, and of course we do invite calls about what you would do if you had a Kiwi slave. 1300 055536. I mean, you could prop up the local sports team if you're in a rugby-playing state, I suppose.
Yes.
They're probably capable of working in the garden.
Yes.
Simple commands. Anybody who's been to New Zealand will know what I'm talking about.
Yes, well said. Yes.
But one of the reasons that one wouldn't want to go to New Zealand anymore, Stirling, is that can you believe that there is a coalition of politicians there that want to ban the smacking of children? Reasonable discipline of the young folk is one of the bedrocks of society, because if children aren't well behaved, things just crumble around us. We've all sat on aeroplanes, Stirling, with a crying child next door and cheerfully just wanted to throttle it.
Yes.
Well, New Zealand is going to ban the smacking of children. What will this do? Some of our great traditions were built on the Anzac legend.
Yes.
Australian toughness, reliability, shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
Good shots with the rifle.
Yes.
Able to live off the land.
This is, if I can coin a phrase, Tom, the nanny state gone mad.
Well, it is. And I mean, I put it to you, I mean, we had an American, David Batson, who, amongst some of the rantings about slavery and its alleged existence, did point out that Australia has stood shoulder to shoulder with the Americans in the war on terror, as shown by our willingness to keep David Hicks in prison.
Yes.
But in New Zealand, I mean, we won't be able to rely on them anymore.
No. Well, they've actually scrapped the combat capability part of their Air Force. They will stand shoulder to shoulder with us at nothing. Unless it was a full-blooded retreat from a battle.
Well, look, I can tell you, the New Zealanders are turning into a pansy nation.
Yes,
there I said it. No smacking of children. No guns in the army.
No, the army does comprise of at least 7 or 8 pansy divisions. Yes,
well said, Stirling.
Pansy divisions.
And in some states in Australia, the same disease is being caught. For example, in the People's Republic of Victoria, as I like to put it.
Yes.
In
Victoria Grad. Yes.
Yes, the Politburo that runs this, the wonderful state of Victoria, has said that at all kindergartens and primary schools that are run by the government that war toys are to be banned. And I put it to the politicians, the Politburo that runs the state of Victoria.
Yes.
What about chess? Will you be banning that?
Yes, good point.
You know,
yes.
I learned to dodge a wet tennis ball on the school oval. It hurt when it hit me.
Yes.
It taught me a lesson.
Do so on the battlefield. This primes our nation for the takeover by the Indonesian, by the Asian hordes of the north. And this is exactly what this fifth column running the Victorian government obviously want.
Well, they do. I mean, they want to turn us into like a New Zealand-style pansy nation. But there are signs for hope.
Yes.
All right. There are some other countries. There are lessons we can learn.
Yes.
To say that family values haven't been abandoned everywhere. For example, in Poland, the Conservative League of Polish Families, of course, we've often looked at their website here on Restoring the Balance.
Yes.
Part of the governing coalition, so this is not just an opposition stunt, this is part of the government of Poland, has issued a new law that will prohibit the promotion of homosexuality and other deviance.
Other deviance, yes.
In schools.
Yes.
So the Poles aren't afraid to say this is wrong.
No.
The children need to be taught the right way, not the wrong way to do things.
This is one example where our political leaders should listen to the Poles.
Yes.
Rather than saying they ignore them.
That's right.
Yes. Now, have you ever met a Polish homosexual?
No, I have not, Stirling.
Yes. Well
there
said.
you go. A proud nation, also an ally in the war on terror.
Yes.
And we go from Poland to another nation starting with P, Pakistan.
Yes.
Now, can you...
fellow ally in the war against terror.
Fellow ally, General Musharraf, clapped on the shoulders by George W. Bush.
Yes.
And can you believe that in Pakistan, young schoolgirls have taken it upon themselves, schoolgirls who are offended by the vice and that they see in the society around them.
Yes.
They're putting on their burqas and launching vice and virtue raids on brothels in the capital.
Yes.
And demanding the closure of music and video stores.
Well, I would hold the door open for them here at Triple J. I'll give them the address. All they have to do is call the station. I would love to see a bunch of fanatical Pakistani schoolgirls enforcing some sort of virtue in this place.
Yes, coming in here in this giant sort of latte-serving cafe with the don't do any work sign on the on the door.
Yes.
And of course, some of the music that you're forced to play in between the far more valid talking segments that we do.
Yes, exactly.
It could be stopped.
It could. And speaking of talking valid, we are asking if you had a New Zealand slave. If you had a slave in your house, what menial task would you get them to perform? And we have Joe from Bundaberg. Joe, if you had a slave, what would you get this slave to do?
Oh, well, I already have a New Zealand slave in my house.
Excellent.
It is my wife.
Excellent.
And, she does the cooking and the cleaning very well.
Excellent.
But I certainly do need another one.
Yes.
And because it is no longer practical nor politically correct for me to have an ivory back scratcher.
Ivory, yes.
Yes, I would like another slave to scratch my back.
Yes, yes. How often?
Well, quite often. I do get itchy.
Yes.
As most Australian men do. Certainly, I would like to keep that slave on the back and no further down the body.
Yes. Joe, the obvious question, I guess, in rounded down to the nearest 10, how broad is your wife's vocabulary of English words?
Oh, I think she's really got a good grasp on about 3 English words.
Yes.
And the rest seems to
sit,
be some
stay,
sort of
fetch.
English.
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes. Yes. Would you recommend a New Zealander?
Oh, well, certainly for some of the tasks that probably isn't suitable to be talked about on the radio, certainly they are very good.
Yes.
But for the cooking and the cleaning, well, the cleaning is A1. The cooking perhaps needs a little work.
No Indigenous cooking in New Zealand.
No.
Still, and challenged, of course, by the words in any cookbook.
Well, certainly, and I should perhaps mention, though, they are good if you like your meal cooked in the dirt and the ground.
Yes.
Yes, well, that's something that the New Zealanders can certainly teach us here in Australia, can't they, Joe? How to cook our food in the dirt, in the ground.
Yes. Joe, it's been a pleasure. It's been illuminating talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call. We've got Tulio.
How are you going?
Very well, Tulio. If you had a New Zealand slave about your house, what would you have them do?
Well, the menial tasks that come to mind is the cutlery.
Cutlery, yes.
How many people hate doing the cutlery after a big hungy?
Now, Tully, you're obviously talking about the good silver cutlery that tends to blemish easily.
Yeah, and we could remunerate them with lamb shanks, that it wouldn't cost us much, and we could have them cooked or uncooked, whatever they prefer.
Yes.
After, when they go to bed, they might need to rub up close to a piece of cutlery or maybe even a lamb shank, who knows?
Yes, a lamb shank, I think, is classed as a sex toy in New Zealand. Yes.
And you wouldn't even have to use the battery.
Yes, well said by me, I should say. You would, and I would urge anybody, and I've often said this about New Zealanders, when you shake hands with a New Zealander afterwards, count your fingers.
Indeed.
I would not trust them with cutlery.
Well, you give them the blunt cut, or even the plastic stuff,
Yes.
We could segregate the cutlery, no problem.
And, of course, cutlery is one of the great victims of the war on terror these days.
Yes.
You fly even our top airlines, Qantas.
How many bottle openers have gone by the wayside through those scanners?
How many nail clippers can we no longer take on the aeroplane?
Well, individual liberty is not an absolute in these times.
And the little scissors to cleanse the nasal with the overgrowing hair, we can't get those anymore.
Well, that's another task, of course. You could get a New Zealand slave to do manually for you.
But it would have to be very blunt.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, Stirling, thus far we've got replacing the ivory back scratcher. I think scratching the back is something that most New Zealanders would be capable of.
Yes.
Cooking, preferably not in a dirt-filled hole in the ground.
Yes.
But modern cooking techniques could possibly be taught.
Yes.
Trimming excess nasal hair, another, I think, let's face it, unpleasant task that a Kiwi slave could be brought to Australia to perform.
Yes. And cleaning the cutlery.
What a great idea.
Thank you, Tulio. If you have any other suggestions as to what your Kiwi slave could do for you, 1300 055536 is the Kiwi Slave hotline here on Triple J. It all catches up with you. It does in the end. You keep voting Labor and the place just turns to crap. It's basically, I can put it no other way. If you live in New South Wales, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, Stirling, you're not normally such a plain-spoken man, but sometimes the facts just cry out. They speak for themselves, don't they?
They certainly do, Tom. One fact that speaks very well for itself was the global security structure that was set in place at the end of World War II.
That's right. We were thankful to live under the nuclear umbrella.
Yes. Under the protection of the United States military, where we had a Cold War scenario for 50-odd years where the USSR, the forces of evil, were stared down by the
communist forces of evil.
Were stared down by our ally and friend, the United States. In the late 80s, the early 90s, that system unravelled when, thankfully, the evil empire crumbled. And
just let's point out for Triple J listeners, we weren't talking about Ronald Reagan ceasing to be the President of the United States in 1988. The evil empire crumbling was, of course, the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yes, in the early 90s. Now, people have fretted and I guess assumed that the Cold War is over and nuclear weapons, which maintained the peace for so long, have been disarmed and are no longer a problem. And my concern has always been for the vast companies who built and maintained those missiles. What were they to do? Thankfully, they are back in production again.
And, of course, let's not forget that the Cold War notwithstanding, the last time we had to use the nuclear weapons in anger, it was against the Jap menace, which was directly threatening Australia at the time.
Yes. You wonder why we talk about the poisonous hordes to the north. Well, it was a reality some 70 years ago. But here, an hysterical voice will always be raised in protest against global security and the instruments of global security such as nuclear weapons. And that voice joins us now. Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, a disarmament educator, author, activist and producer, is here to talk to us about what she calls the nuclear menace.
Thank you, Stirling.
Kathleen, what exactly is your problem with nuclear weapons?
Well, I understand that you've had a visitor from the United States recently, Dick Cheney.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I'm...
Vice President Cheney, we call him.
Yes, Dick, I call him.
Yes, he's a good friend of this country. Yes.
So I'm here to restore the balance on that score.
Yes.
And, I teach young people about nuclear issues and have recently made a film about survivors from Nagasaki.
Yes.
Is that like one of those films like Duck and Cover from the mid-1950s about how children should get under their school desks when the Russian bomb is inevitably dropped?
No, it's a film about survivors, people who actually survived the atomic bombing in Nagasaki. And we follow Sakue Shimohira, who was 10 years old, hiding in a bomb shelter when the second atomic bomb was used against Japanese civilians.
Yes, dropped by the B-29 boxcar. Yes,
that's
bang
right.
On target. Yes, we should point out that seems a one-dimensional view of nuclear weapons, painting them as all bad.
Well, my opinion is that all nuclear weapons are bad. They're indiscriminate weapons. There's no way to discriminate between combatants and non-combatants. And because of the long-lived radioactive materials, nuclear weapons are essentially like waging war on future generations.
Well, a very good friend of mine, his father was in the Tiger Force, which was stationed off Japan in 1945. And they estimated, Robert McNamara, working at the time for the US government, estimated that Allied casualties would have been 750,000 had they had to invade the Japanese mainland. They had the choice of the atomic bomb. Would you have said, no, we shouldn't use the atomic bomb, we should invade and kill 750,000 of our own people and upwards of several million Japanese civilians?
Well, if you look back to the historical record, the invasion was actually not planned for until November of 1945. And many people will argue also that there was loud murmurings of surrender coming from Japan as early as July. So I don't really agree with those hypothetical numbers. But what is in fact true is that over 300,000 people in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki did die as a result of that weapon. And because of radioactive contamination, they're continuing to suffer from ill health and effects of radioactivity through generations. We're now into our third generation of A-bomb survivors.
Yes. What about the good, hard-working people who construct air-launched cruise missiles, multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles like the MX? What about the good people who go to work every day and keep our nation safe?
Well, it's a complex world that we live in. There are good people that work for weapons contractors, but I think that the reason why we still live under the threat, the daily threat of world annihilation, is because people do not understand the real nature of nuclear weapons.
Yes. Are you doing your best to disarm the terrorists?
Well, there aren't... Some people would argue that the very existence of nuclear weapons is terrorism itself. And so it's hard to make that argument, again, a hypothetical argument, to talk about a would-be holder of nuclear weapons when we've got actually 5,000 nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert, ready to launch in 2 to 5 minutes. And that...
for most of them are aimed at bad people. I mean, let's face it, Russia, China, the Middle East, North Korea.
The people who deserve to be nuked.
Yes.
Right, well, Bush and Putin like to play golf together, so you wonder why they've got 5,000 nuclear weapons pointed at each other.
Good fences make good neighbours. That's what I've always said.
Okay.
Yes, but who would you prefer to have a nuclear weapon, Al-Qaeda or the US military?
I would prefer nobody on Earth to have a nuclear weapon.
No, that's not answering the question. If you had to choose...
I wouldn't make that choice. I think the nuclear weapons in the hands of anybody is a terrorist act.
Well, but let's face it, post-1945, for 3 years, the United States was the only country that had the bomb, could have used it without fear of nuclear retribution, and didn't.
Well, the U.S. is actually the only country that has used nuclear weapons.
To defeat a nation that wouldn't surrender?
Yes.
Well, if we do go back to the historical record, we can see that the emperor was ready to surrender in July.
They didn't surrender after the first bomb?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't given much time, was he, fellows?
That 3 days was long enough.
Well,
3 days.
I don't know.
How much longer do you need?
They didn't have the internet back then, did they?
Didn't they?
No.
The internet was brought to us by the US military, though. We should thank them for that.
Yes, the ARPANET. Many things that are...
built to survive a nuclear war.
So they say.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, ARPANET and cockroaches. What a world that would be.
Yes. Now, what is your purpose in actually being in Australia, and how did you actually slip through the net?
I was invited here by ICANN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nukes, and I'm going to be giving a series of talks and screening the film that I produced with Bob Richter called The Last Atomic Bomb.
Yes.
ICANN is launching this international campaign. It's coming here from Australia. It's supported by the IPPNW, the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1985 for their services to disarmament. And I've been invited here to speak about nuclear issues and what we can do about them.
Have you thought about possibly, because one country I don't like having nuclear weapons. One country that really makes me worried is the French.
Yes,
France.
Yes.
I mean, they call themselves an independent deterrent.
Yes,
and they can't be trusted. We all know that.
Yes, never have been.
And they're rude to people.
Yes,
and they like to test things in the South Pacific in our backyard.
Yes.
Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, surely France should be your first target if you want to start ridding the world of nuclear weapons.
I couldn't agree more. France and the UK could actually abolish their weapons tomorrow and nobody would notice. It's absolute folly that either of these two hold on to their so-called independent deterrent. The UK recently had a debate in Parliament and to whether or not to renew their Trident submarine system.
But at least we know with the UK they won't change sides at the drop of a hat.
Yes.
Whereas the French...
Yes.
Well, you never know. I think everybody should get rid of their nuclear weapons, and, you know, that's the way that I'm standing on that one.
Yes, yes. So, Triple J listeners who do have nukes, drop them off. I'm sure your council runs a very responsible nuclear weapon recycling program.
Yes.
Just wait for hard rubbish night. Leave the intercontinental ballistic missile you're keeping under your bed. Leave it on your nature strip or in the appropriate bin. Wheel it very carefully to the curb. And a very large truck from the council will be along any minute.
And failing that, just drop them off at your local ABC centre.
Yes.
Don't mind if they're turned on or not.
Yes. Well, there is, of course, the ABC nuclear missile. It doesn't work and it can't be fired. Yes. Yes, well said. Well said.
So, Stirling and Tom, I wonder if you might like to listen to a sound demonstration that I brought along to really outline the kind of power of nuclear weapons in our world today.
Yes, the power.
I think we would.
The power of them to maintain global security. But yes, please go ahead.
Okay, this is a demonstration that I use in the classroom.
Yes.
I work in high schools in New York City, and I'm just going to have you listen to two sounds.
Yes.
Don't mind this crinkling plastic bag. That's not part of it. Okay, this is the first sound that you're going to hear.
Yes.
That's the sound of one BB dropping into this tin.
That's a ball bearing, yes.
Yes, it's a ball bearing. And dropping into this tin, this is going to represent for us all the firepower of the Second World War.
Yes.
So every time you hear one BB dropping into the tin, that represents all the bullets, bombs, landmines, grenades, including the two nuclear weapons used against civilians in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Every time you hear one ball bearing, that represents the total firepower of the Second World War.
You know, I wasn't in World War II, but I did think it was worse than that.
Yes.
Well, it is, but we're using our imagination, Tom.
Yes.
This is an imagination exercise.
Yes.
This is a audio exercise perfect for radio. So can we just go back to the beginning again?
Okay,
so one
ball bearing is every...
one ball bearing,
bullet,
the sound
of every bullet
bearing.
or bomb expended to destroy Nazi tyranny and Japanese tyranny in World War II and make the world safe for democracy.
No, it's actually all weapons used.
All weapons,
yeah,
okay.
Yes, because they did fight back.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a lot of
Except
bullets
the
being
French.
flown around.
Silence for the French then.
Okay, so all the firepower of the Second World War is represented by this one BB dropping in the tin.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to give you another sound.
Yes.
If you could just listen to it fully.
Sure.
It is the equivalent firepower of the world's nuclear arsenal 62 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yes. Keep going. Right.
I think that was the Italian one then, Stirling. Sort of peters out at the end a bit, doesn't it?
Yes. So nuclear war...
That's the equivalent of 2,667 World War IIs in the world's arsenal today. Quite enough to destroy our world many times over.
Well, sobering statistics.
I suppose they are.
But we should thank the hard-working companies of the American military-industrial complex and the Russian ones as well, who have supplied the sophisticated technology that goes into cruise missiles and MX missiles. And
let's face it, we wouldn't have Velcro or the internet or microwave ovens.
Yes.
These are all byproducts of nuclear technology.
Yes. So we salute those companies on restoring the balance, and we thank you, Dr. Kathleen Sullivan, for coming in to illuminate us with more hysterical leftist rantings about the non-existent threat of nuclear war. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Restoring the Balance, Triple J. I would urge anybody, if they get the chance, Tom, to see the Triple J Breakfast Show live. It is possibly the only chance you'll ever have to see somebody with dreadlocks up before midday.
Yes, a marvellous contradiction in images there.
Yes.
And, of course, someone allegedly working, also employed by the ABC.
Yes, as we pointed out, a form of reverse slavery. When people come to the ABC, they are trapped in an environment where they are not allowed to work. They are compelled not to work. It's quite distressing and dispiriting for those of us.
But of course, at the same time, they are forced to accept more than the normal rate of pay for this not working.
Yes.
And of course, as David Batson, one of our guests tonight, pointed out, he's concerned with slavery, where people are being forced to work for nothing at all.
Yes.
Here at the ABC, the solution is already provided.
Yes. And those of us who have amassed considerable fortunes in the private sector are distressed by coming in here and seeing the inverse of the Protestant work ethic, which has guided the business world for time immemorial.
Absolutely, and of course the same Protestant work ethic that guides the actions of our Prime Minister, John Winston Howard. Of course, his son-in-law,
yes, has demonstrated his virility.
I'm afraid he has, and of course, listeners who have listened to Stirling for some time will be aware that this action of Melanie Howard getting pregnant does pain him. And I know, Stirling, you've done a good job to suppress your feelings.
Yes, as I've said throughout the course of this show, people just need to move on from Melanie being with child and wish her and Rowan, and just get over the fact that she has chosen Rowan.
And that bonfire of the Melanie Howard pictures that's happening in your backyard,
well,
it's just
they will stay where they are as a shrine to Australia's rose. She will only grow more beautiful by assuming her rightful role as mother.
And finally, Stirling, someone who's grown somewhat less beautiful in the past 5 years, David Hicks, on his way back to Australia fairly soon to serve out. I mean, let's face it, if you and I went down, if we were in Adelaide and we went down Rundle Mall with a rocket launcher, or perhaps we're up at Indooroopilly in Queensland, or perhaps parading up and down Oxford Street in Sydney, as happens and too often in our view.
With
a machine gun or rocket launcher, we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Well,
we wouldn't get out of jail for a long time.
5 years and 9 months is a slap on the wrist, but a lot of cynics would point out the timing in relation of this move, bringing him back, the timing of that in relation to the election. And they would be right. Because I smell the faint whiff of something political going on, and for that I blame Kevin Rudd. Kevin Rudd, he has sold out Australia again.
Yes,
He's done some sort of deal with the Americans.
Now, we've done a deal with the Americans, and David Hicks, I'm afraid, is going to become a poster boy of the left. He'll be back in Australia soon. He'll be out before you know it, giving talks, writing books.
Yes.
He'll have to get his hair cut, of course, first.
Yes. I noticed he has long hair now, and I noticed the Americans were not able, after months of intensive interrogation, to get from him the secret of younger-looking hair. And I would that they would. Bring out the phone books, I say. There was an attempt to raise sympathy for him in Martin Place by putting on a replica cell of his there, 2 metres by 2 metres. If you know anything about property in Sydney, you would be delighted to live in a house as big as that.
That's right. Many apartments don't have their own inbuilt loo in Sydney these days.
Made of steel.
People sacrifice everything for location, location.
You give me a steel loo, tell me it's made by a Swedish design firm, and I'll pay $2,000 for it. This has been Restoring the Balance. Thank you, Tom. It's been an honour. We will be back next week. Triple J.